Steve Austin went out there and cut a promo, and he was so glad that the trappings of the ringmaster had been ripped from him, and he could finally be himself.
Jim Cornette says no one comes close. Not the high flyers, not the internet darlings chasing a viral moment, not the stars with the biggest highlight reels on social media. When Jim Cornette talks about the wrestlers he loves most, he is not talking about who did the single flashiest move or who trended online for one single night. He is talking about something much deeper. He is talking about the 10 men who, in his eyes, understood professional wrestling better than almost anyone else who ever stepped into a ring. Most fans think they already know Jim Cornette. They know him as the loud voice who complains about modern wrestling. They know him as the manager who screamed at referees, the promoter who fought for the old territories, the commentator who never held back an opinion. People assume he simply hates anything new, but that is only half the story, and it might be the less interesting half. The truth is that Cornette's criticism only makes sense once you understand what he loves. His complaints are not random insults thrown at anyone doing something different. They come from a very specific philosophy of what professional wrestling is supposed to be. And the clearest way to understand that philosophy is not through his rants, it is through his favorites. These 10 wrestlers are not just a list of names picked because they were popular or because they won championships. Each one represents a piece of the puzzle. Each one shows a different part of what Cornette believes makes wrestling work as an art form and as a business. Believability, ring psychology, flawless execution, protecting the illusion that makes the whole business possible. By the time we reach the very top of this list, you will not just know 10 names. You will understand the entire framework Jim Cornette uses to judge everything he watches. And by the end, you will also see that his philosophy is not stuck in the past. It still lives on today, in performers who may surprise you. Think about how unusual that is for a moment. Most lists like this get built around trophies, championships won, attendance records, pay-per-view buy rates. But this list works differently. It is built around respect. The kind of respect one wrestler gives another after watching thousands of matches and knowing exactly what it takes to make an audience believe. That is a much harder thing to earn than a title belt, and it is exactly why this countdown carries so much weight. Keep those 4 principles close in your mind as we move step by step through this entire countdown together. Believability, ring psychology, execution, protecting the business. You will hear these same 4 ideas again and again, because every name on this list earns its spot by demonstrating at least one of them at the highest possible level. Some names will demonstrate 2 or 3 at once. And by the time we reach the final name, you will understand why Cornette considers this list less a ranking and more a complete philosophy of professional wrestling. So let's begin the countdown, starting with the man Cornette often calls the most naturally gifted worker who ever lived. Number 10 on Jim Cornette's list is beautiful Bobby Eaton. To the casual fan, Bobby Eaton might not jump off the page the way a big champion's name would. He never held the kind of spotlight that comes with a world title reign built for magazine covers. But to Cornette, Eaton was something rarer than a champion. He was the perfect worker. As part of the Midnight Express, teaming first with Dennis Condrey and later with Stan Lane, Eaton built his name across Mid-South Wrestling, the Universal Wrestling Federation, and World Championship Wrestling. Cornette managed that team, which means he watched Eaton up close, night after night, in towns most fans today have never heard of. What made Eaton so special was not one big move or one unforgettable match. It was everything, every single night. Cornette has said that Eaton possessed an instinct that could not be taught. He knew how to make his opponent look like a star while still keeping the match exciting for himself. He never had what people in wrestling call a bad match, because his timing was so precise that even an inexperienced opponent looked good standing across the ring from him. Take his signature top rope knee drop, known as the Alabama Jam. To the crowd, it looked devastating, a big man launching off the ropes with real impact. But to the wrestler underneath him, it was safe, controlled, and expertly placed. That single move captures exactly what Cornette values. It looks real to the fans in the seats. It protects the health of the man taking the bump. That is believability and execution working together perfectly. As the mechanical anchor of his tag team, Eaton also served as something like a baseline for work rate across 3 different promotions. Wherever he went, whoever he was paired with, the quality of the match rarely dropped, because his own contribution was so consistently strong. That kind of dependable excellence is not glamorous, but inside the wrestling business, it is treasured precisely because it is so rare. Eaton's character off-camera only deepened Cornette's respect. He was known throughout the wrestling world for his humility and generosity. Wrestlers who traveled with him would tell stories about how he carried extra bags on the road, packed with basic supplies like toiletries and gear, just in case a fellow wrestler needed something and could not get it themselves. In an industry full of egos, Eaton was remembered as a quiet professional who helped everyone around him without asking for credit. Cornette calls him the ultimate wrestler's wrestler, and it is easy to see why. Eaton never needed to be the loudest voice in the room or the biggest name on the marquee. He simply did the job better than almost anyone else, night after night, for the benefit of the show and the benefit of the business. In a modern wrestling landscape often obsessed with viral moments and highlight clips built for social media, Eaton represents something almost forgotten: consistency, selflessness, the quiet mastery of craft that never demanded attention but always earned respect from the people who understood the business best. That is why Bobby Eaton sits at number 10. Not because he was the biggest star, but because he was, in Cornette's eyes, the most complete professional the business ever produced. And that respect for quiet mastery over flashy attention sets the tone for everything still to come on this list. Notice something important about this first choice. Cornette did not open his list with the biggest name available to him. He opened it with the wrestler who best represents the foundation everything else is built on. Before a wrestler can become a legendary champion or a box office draw, he has to master the basics the way Eaton did. That is a deliberate message, and it tells you exactly how Cornette wants this entire countdown understood. The next name on the list takes that foundation and applies it on the largest stage professional wrestling had to offer during the height of the territory system. Number 9 is Ric Flair, the Nature Boy, and the man Cornette considers the gold standard of main event psychology. If Bobby Eaton represents perfect execution in the smaller moments, Ric Flair represents mastery on the grandest stage professional wrestling had to offer during the territory era. Flair held the NWA World Heavyweight Championship and, in doing so, became something like a traveling ambassador for the entire business. Because the National Wrestling Alliance was made up of many separate regional territories, the champion did not simply defend his title in one city. He traveled from territory to territory, wrestling the top babyface star of each region. Think about what that job actually required. Flair could not just wrestle the same match every night. He had to walk into a brand new city, face a wrestler the local fans already loved, and convince every single person in that building that their hometown hero had a real chance to become the new world champion. 60-minute matches, sometimes ending in draws because of time limits, were common. Flair would push these local heroes right to the edge of victory before using subtle, cunning heel tactics to escape, with the title still around his waist. This is where Cornette's appreciation becomes so clear. It was not simply about Flair winning matches, it was about how he made the fans feel while doing it. Every crowd left the building believing that their guy really could have won. That belief is what kept people buying tickets to see the rematch. That belief is what made Flair, defending a traveling championship across dozens of cities, one of the most important economic engines the National Wrestling Alliance ever had. Cornette highlights specific tools that made this possible. Flair's cardiovascular conditioning allowed him to wrestle at a grueling pace for up to an hour, without losing believability through visible exhaustion at the wrong moments. His promo work built genuine excitement before the bell even rang, so that the in-ring drama had a foundation already laid by his words. And above all, his ability to make his opponents look like legitimate threats to his title elevated everyone he stepped into the ring with. As a traveling champion, Flair essentially operated as the engine of the entire National Wrestling Alliance system, moving from region to region and generating box office excitement everywhere he landed. That role demanded more than talent. It demanded consistency, night after night, city after city, without ever letting the illusion slip for even a single crowd. This is ring psychology in its purest form, the second pillar of Cornette's philosophy. It is not about doing the most moves. It is about understanding pacing, tension, and the emotional journey of the crowd, from the opening bell to the final pin or submission. Flair mastered that journey better than almost anyone in the history of the National Wrestling Alliance, and he did it over and over again, in city after city, for years. Where modern wrestling sometimes rushes through matches packed with rapid-fire spots designed to impress on video clips, Flair's matches were built like slow-burning stories. Every moment served a purpose. Every near fall meant something because it had been earned through nearly an hour of careful storytelling. That is precisely why Cornette places him at number 9, a champion whose true skill was not simply wrestling, but making an entire arena believe in a story, night after night. There is a lesson buried inside Flair's story that becomes important later in this countdown. A champion's job is never really about himself. It is about the challenger standing across the ring, and whether the fans believe that challenger has a real chance. Flair understood that lesson completely, and as we move down this list, you will see that same lesson show up again in different forms, applied by different wrestlers in different situations. From the biggest traveling stage in wrestling, we now move to a single regional territory, where one man built an entire promotion around pure crowd connection. Number 8 is Jerry the King Lawler, a wrestler Cornette studied up close, long before he ever became a manager himself. Cornette's connection to Lawler goes back to his earliest days around professional wrestling, when he worked as a ringside photographer in the Memphis territory. That job placed him close enough to see every single reaction on every single face in the building, every camera flash catching a genuine moment of real emotion from the crowd, long before he ever managed a wrestler of his own or built a promotion of his own. From that position, close enough to see every detail, Cornette watched Lawler build one of the most successful regional wrestling promotions in the entire country, largely through pure crowd psychology, rather than complicated athletic maneuvers. What set Lawler apart, in Cornette's eyes, was efficiency. Lawler did not need a long list of complicated holds or high-risk aerial moves to get a crowd emotionally invested. He achieved maximum emotional response using the most basic tools available to a wrestler: a well-timed punch, a dramatic sell of an injury, the build-up and payoff of a fireball to the face during a heated feud. These simple tools, delivered with expert timing and total commitment, could send an entire arena into an emotional frenzy. Cornette considers Lawler one of history's greatest crowd manipulators, and that word, manipulator, is meant as the highest compliment inside the wrestling business. Lawler understood exactly how to build local storylines that meant everything to the people of Memphis, even if those storylines meant nothing to fans in another city. He proved that a wrestler with a deep understanding of his specific audience, combined with sharp interview skills, could generate enormous ticket sales without needing a single complicated maneuver. This connects directly to Cornette's core belief that psychology matters more than physical spectacle. Lawler's interviews built anticipation. His selling made every strike look devastating. His pacing kept fans on the edge of their seats using tools any wrestler could theoretically learn, if they had the instincts and discipline to use them correctly. It was never about difficulty. It was about understanding people. Lawler functioned as both the franchise babyface fans rallied behind and, at other times, the top regional heel, driving the promotion's biggest storylines. That flexibility, being able to slide between roles depending on what the territory needed most, shows a wrestler who understood the business side of the equation just as well as the performance side. It is a rare combination, and it is part of why Cornette speaks about Lawler with such lasting respect. In an era where wrestling promotions often chase attention through elaborate choreography and stunt work, Lawler's example stands as proof that raw storytelling and audience connection can outperform physical complexity every single time. Cornette watched this happen firsthand in Memphis, and it clearly shaped his entire outlook on what makes a wrestler valuable to a promotion's bottom line. That is why Jerry Lawler holds the number 8 spot. Not for spectacular athleticism, but for a mastery of crowd psychology so complete that Cornette still references it as a blueprint for how professional wrestling is supposed to connect with the people paying to watch. Cornette was not just a fan watching Lawler from a distance. He stood at ringside with a camera, close enough to see every reaction on every face in the building. That closeness matters. It means his appreciation for Lawler is not built on legend or secondhand stories. It comes from direct observation of exactly how effective simple, honest storytelling can be when it is aimed precisely at the right audience. The next wrestler on this list takes a completely different approach, trading emotional crowd manipulation for pure technical discipline inside the ring itself. Number 7 is Bret the Hitman Hart, a wrestler Cornette praises as a master technician devoted to total physical realism. Bret Hart's reputation inside the wrestling business was built on discipline. Cornette respects Hart because of his relentless commitment to making every hold, every strike, and every reversal look completely authentic. For Hart, professional wrestling was never something to treat casually. He approached it as a serious athletic craft, one that deserved the same respect as any legitimate competitive sport. This dedication shows most clearly when Cornette compares Hart to his well-known rival, Shawn Michaels. Cornette describes Michaels as a flashy performer, someone who thrived on dramatic flair and eye-catching moments. Hart, by contrast, is described as the more disciplined worker, someone who built his matches with structural logic. Every sequence in a Hart match connected to the next. Nothing felt random or thrown in simply to excite the crowd for a moment. Everything protected the credibility of the match and, by extension, the credibility of the business itself. Hart's matches functioned almost like carefully constructed arguments, with each hold and each reversal building logically on what came before. He served as a kind of work rate anchor throughout his championship runs, someone whose matches could always be trusted to hold together structurally, no matter who stood across the ring from him. That reliability, night after night, is a large part of why Cornette places such high value on his career. One detail Cornette often points to is something remarkably simple but deeply significant inside the wrestling world. Bret Hart took pride in never seriously injuring an opponent during a match. Given how physically demanding professional wrestling can be, and how many wrestlers throughout history have suffered career-altering injuries from careless execution, this record speaks volumes about Hart's precision. He could deliver moves that looked brutal to the audience, while keeping his opponent completely safe. This is mechanical excellence, the third pillar in Cornette's framework. It is not enough for a move to look impressive. It has to be performed with such precision that it protects the wrestler taking the impact while still convincing the crowd of real physical stakes. Hart achieved this balance as well as almost anyone in wrestling history, according to Cornette's evaluation. Modern wrestling, with its often faster pace and higher risk maneuvers, does not always place the same emphasis on this kind of careful, structural building block approach. Hart's style stands as a reminder that discipline and precision, rather than danger and spectacle, can create matches that hold up as some of the most respected in wrestling history. That discipline is exactly why Bret Hart earns the number 7 position on Cornette's list. Discipline like that does not happen by accident. It comes from a wrestler who sees every match as a responsibility, not just to himself, but to the opponent standing across the ring, and to the business as a whole. Hart carried that responsibility with him for his entire career, and it is exactly the kind of quiet professionalism Cornette has praised again and again throughout this countdown. Our next wrestler shows that this same commitment to believability does not always have to come from physical toughness. Sometimes it comes from words alone. Number 6 is Nick Bockwinkel, the sophisticated champion who ruled the American Wrestling Association. Nick Bockwinkel brought something different to professional wrestling, and Cornette clearly admires the contrast he offered. Rather than relying on the traditional heel tactics of yelling, cheating obviously, or physically intimidating opponents, Bockwinkel presented himself as an articulate, intelligent figure. He spoke with calm authority, more like a polished corporate executive than a stereotypical wrestling villain, and that approach made him one of the most effective heels of his era. Cornette cites Bockwinkel as a masterclass in promo delivery. His interviews did not need volume or aggression to generate heat from the crowd. Instead, his calm, confident, almost condescending tone made fans desperate to see him humbled by a beloved babyface challenger. This is a subtle skill, and it takes real command of language and pacing to pull off convincingly, night after night, in front of live crowds who wanted him to lose. Inside the ring, Bockwinkel matched this approach with methodical, controlled work. His submission holds were applied with patience rather than urgency. His rule-breaking was subtle, often happening just outside the view of the referee, which made fans in the crowd feel like they were watching something dishonest happen right in front of them. His ring generalship, meaning his ability to control the pace and positioning of a match, made every contest feel deliberate and intelligent, rather than chaotic. Bockwinkel's spatial ring positioning deserves special mention too. He always seemed to know exactly where he was in relation to the ropes, the referee, and his opponent, using that awareness to control the flow of a match, without ever looking like he was rushing or forcing anything. That kind of quiet ring generalship is easy to overlook if you are not watching closely, but Cornette, who studies these details for a living, never missed it. As champion of the American Wrestling Association, Bockwinkel represented a different flavor of the same underlying philosophy Cornette values across this entire list. Believability did not always have to come from brute physical intensity. It could also come from psychological sophistication, from a heel so composed and self-assured that audiences wanted nothing more than to see him finally get what was coming to him. This range is important to understanding Cornette's evaluation criteria. He does not favor only one style of wrestler. He favors wrestlers who fully commit to their persona and execute it with total conviction, whether that persona is a tough physical brawler or, as in Bockwinkel's case, a calm and calculating corporate villain. That complete commitment to character, combined with technical precision inside the ring, is exactly why Nick Bockwinkel claims the number 6 position. There is something worth pointing out here. Bockwinkel never had to raise his voice to be dangerous. He proved that a wrestler's greatest weapon can be complete control of his words, his pacing, and his presence. rather than aggression. That kind of restraint takes real confidence, and it is a skill Cornette clearly holds in very high regard. Our next wrestler flips that approach entirely, relying not on calm control but on pure, undeniable physical presence. Number 5 is Harley Race, a champion whose aura of pure toughness left a permanent mark on Cornette's view of wrestling. Where some wrestlers on this list earn respect through psychological complexity or technical precision, Harley Race earns his place through something much more primal. Cornette describes Race as the epitome of the tough, believable NWA World Champion, a wrestler who commanded total respect from fans, promoters, and even fellow wrestlers, simply through his presence and his physical intensity. There is something powerful about a champion who does not need elaborate storytelling tricks to convince people he is dangerous. Race carried himself with a legitimate toughness that made audiences believe, without question, that facing him in the ring was a genuinely difficult and even risky proposition. This kind of aura cannot be manufactured through camera tricks or clever editing. It has to be earned through consistent, believable performance over years inside the ring. As an enforcer and a legitimate NWA World Champion, Race carried an aura that made every title defense feel like a genuine crisis for whichever challenger stood across from him. Fans did not simply hope their favorite could win. They worried, quite seriously, about what might happen if the match went wrong. That kind of worry is exactly what Cornette means when he talks about believability at its highest level. Cornette holds Race in especially high regard for how effectively he made fans believe in the physical stakes of every single match. Whether Race was defending his championship against a rising babyface or engaging in a heated territorial feud, audiences never doubted that real physical danger was involved. That belief, that suspension of disbelief that convinces a paying customer they are watching something genuinely dangerous, sits right at the center of Cornette's entire philosophy. What makes Race especially respected within the business, beyond just his intimidating presence, is his willingness to take punishing bumps in order to elevate the babyfaces challenging him for the title. Even as a dominant, menacing champion, Race understood that his job was not only to look tough, it was to make his challengers look like legitimate threats capable of finally dethroning him. He absorbed real physical punishment to sell that threat convincingly, all while somehow maintaining the aura that made him feel unstoppable even in defeat. This balance, being both a believable threat and a generous veteran willing to make his opponents look strong, protected the integrity of the NWA World Championship for years. It kept the title feeling valuable and dangerous, rather than like a prop passed around for storyline convenience. That protection of the business, combined with his sheer physical credibility, is why Harley Race earns the number 5 spot on Cornette's countdown. Race shows us something that ties directly back to Ric Flair earlier in this countdown. A champion protects his title not by refusing to lose ground, but by making every challenger feel like a genuine threat. Race did that through toughness. Flair did it through pacing and cardio. Different tools, same underlying respect for what a championship is supposed to represent to the fans watching. Halfway through this list, we now move to a wrestler whose career refused to stay still, changing shape across 3 completely different decades of wrestling history. Number 4 is Terry Funk, a performer whose versatility and emotional honesty spanned multiple entire eras of professional wrestling. Few wrestlers in history managed to remain relevant, respected, and effective across as many decades as Terry Funk. Cornette admires him deeply for this remarkable longevity, but longevity alone is not what earns Funk his spot on this list. It is the way Funk transformed himself, era after era, while never losing the emotional authenticity that made him so compelling to watch. In the 1970s, Funk operated as a classic technical champion, holding the NWA World Heavyweight Championship and representing the same kind of traveling, credible title holder that Cornette respects so deeply in wrestlers like Ric Flair and Harley Race. But Funk did not stay locked into that single identity. In the 1980s, he reinvented himself as an unhinged, wild heel, someone whose unpredictable behavior made him feel genuinely dangerous and unstable in the eyes of the audience. Then, in the 1990s, he became an iconic hardcore veteran, embracing a grittier, more violent style that still somehow carried the same emotional weight as his earlier technical work. Cornette highlights Funk's unique ability to convey genuine fear, vulnerability, and rage throughout all of these transformations. This is a rare skill. Many wrestlers can play tough or play confident, but conveying real vulnerability, real fear, in a way that still feels controlled and purposeful, rather than embarrassing, requires an emotional honesty that few performers ever master. Funk's rivalries did not feel like scripted storylines to the audience. They felt like personal, deeply held vendettas, the kind of conflict that made fans forget, at least for a moment, that they were watching a performance. Whether Funk was portraying an attraction heel, a beloved babyface champion, or a hardcore icon later in his career, the through line never changed. Every version of Terry Funk felt like a real person reacting to real circumstances, not a performer reciting a script. That consistency across such wildly different characters is a testament to just how deeply his emotional instincts ran. This willingness to fully commit, to do whatever the story required in order to get his opponent over and make the match feel real, is exactly why Terry Funk earned so much respect throughout the wrestling industry. He was never protecting his own ego or his own spot on the card above the needs of the story. He protected the business itself by prioritizing believability and emotional truth over personal comfort or convenience. That complete devotion to authenticity across decades of reinvention is why Terry Funk holds the number 4 position on Jim Cornette's list, a living example of how versatility and emotional honesty can define an entire career. Funk proves something important as this countdown climbs toward its final 3 names. Longevity in wrestling is not just about staying employed for a long time. It is about staying believable, decade after decade, even as your body changes and the industry around you shifts. Very few wrestlers manage that trick. Funk did it 3 separate times. Our next name takes us to a wrestler whose fundamentals were shaped by that same territory era, but whose eventual fame stretched far beyond anything the territory system ever produced. Number 3 is Stone Cold Steve Austin, a wrestler Cornette believed in long before the rest of the wrestling world caught up. It is easy to forget, given how enormous Steve Austin eventually became, that Cornette was championing him years before his breakout stardom in the Attitude Era. During Austin's early runs in World Championship Wrestling and later in the World Wrestling Federation, performing under the name Stunning Steve Austin, Cornette was already a vocal advocate for his talent, recognizing something in his work that he believed deserved a much bigger spotlight. What impressed Cornette so much about Austin during those early years was his firm foundation in Southern-style wrestling mechanics. This was not flashy, spectacle-driven wrestling. It was grounded, aggressive, and built on fundamentals, the same kind of fundamentals that shaped so many of the other wrestlers already discussed on this list. Austin's offensive execution was sharp and believable, and his promo intensity showed early signs of the electric presence that would eventually make him one of the biggest stars the industry ever produced. Even in those early days, Austin's aggressive offensive strikes and physical pacing carried the same clarity Cornette respected in wrestlers from the territory era. Nothing about his early style felt accidental. Every strike had purpose behind it, and every sequence built toward a believable conclusion. The same qualities that had defined the very best main event workers for decades before Austin ever arrived on national television. When Austin later transformed into Stone Cold and became, by many measures, the single highest-drawing box office star in wrestling history, Cornette made a point of emphasizing something important. Austin achieved this monumental success without abandoning the fundamentals that built his early career. His main event brawling style, even at the peak of his mainstream fame, retained structural clarity. His matches still made logical sense. His selling of injuries and exhaustion remained effective and believable, rather than being replaced by pure spectacle. This is a critical point in understanding Cornette's philosophy. He does not view mainstream commercial success and technical, psychological wrestling fundamentals as opposing forces. Austin proves, in Cornette's eyes, that a wrestler can reach the absolute highest level of popularity and box office success while still respecting the pillars of believability, ring psychology, and technical execution that define quality professional wrestling. Austin's story stands as a rebuttal to the idea that fundamentals only matter to smaller niche audiences. He shows that the same principles which built the careers of territory-era legends like Race, Flair, and Funk could also fuel one of the biggest commercial phenomena in wrestling history. That is precisely why Steve Austin claims the number 3 spot, proof that Cornette's philosophy and mainstream success are not mutually exclusive. This is arguably the most important lesson in the entire countdown so far. Cornette is often painted as someone who resents modern success, but Austin's inclusion proves otherwise. He does not resent success. He simply insists that success be built on a real foundation, and Austin is living proof that the two are not opposites at all. As we reach the final 2 names on this list, we move away from singular stardom and back toward the kind of tactical, behind-the-scenes intelligence that keeps an entire promotion running smoothly. Number 2 is Arn Anderson, known throughout the wrestling world as the quintessential ring general. If there is one wrestler on this list who represents pure tactical mastery, it is Arn Anderson. Cornette holds Anderson up as an example of everything he values in both tag team and singles heel psychology, and it is not difficult to understand why once you look closely at how Anderson approached his work. As a foundational member of the legendary stable known as the Four Horsemen, Anderson built his reputation through targeted, methodical offensive psychology. Rather than throwing random offense at an opponent, Anderson would systematically attack a specific body part, often an arm or the spine, patiently wearing it down over the course of a match to set up his devastating finishing maneuver. This approach turned every match into a kind of story, with a clear beginning, middle, and end, all centered around a single logical target. Cornette specifically praises Anderson's iconic snap spinebuster, a move that became legendary throughout the industry for how convincingly it looked while remaining safely executed. As the enforcer of his stable, Anderson also served as a kind of stabilizing force, keeping the group's storylines grounded even when the personalities around him leaned toward the theatrical. That grounding influence, quietly holding everything together while others took the spotlight, is exactly the kind of contribution Cornette pays closest attention to. Beyond his in-ring offense, Cornette also highlights Anderson's believable interview style, one built on quiet confidence and sharp, cutting words rather than over-the-top theatrics. It is fitting that Anderson stands just one spot away from the very top, and that his career connects directly back to Bobby Eaton at number 10. Between those two names, the entire Four Horsemen era of tag team psychology comes full circle, showing just how deeply connected every name on this list truly is. And now, at last, we arrive at the single name Jim Cornette places above every other wrestler in his personal history of the business. And now we reach number 1. The wrestler Jim Cornette considers the absolute best big man in professional wrestling history, The Undertaker, Mark Calaway. There is something almost poetic about The Undertaker claiming the top spot on this list, because his character required an entirely different kind of commitment than any other wrestler discussed so far. The Undertaker was not a realistic Southern brawler or a traveling technical champion. He was an outlandish, supernatural character, a presentation that could have easily collapsed into self-parody if handled with anything less than total conviction. Cornette praises Calaway for maintaining that conviction across a multi-decade career. Performing under such a dramatic, otherworldly gimmick required total commitment every single night. If Calaway had ever let the character slip, if he had ever seemed to wink at the audience or treat the gimmick as a joke, the entire illusion could have fallen apart instantly. Instead, he protected that character with remarkable discipline for decades, allowing an inherently unrealistic concept to feel completely credible to generations of fans. This connects directly to the fourth pillar of Cornette's philosophy, protecting the business and its kayfabe integrity. There is arguably no better example throughout wrestling history of a performer maintaining character continuity and treating an unusual persona with total seriousness than The Undertaker. Cornette specifically praises Calaway for maintaining strict in-ring selling logic even within such a fantastical character, ensuring that even the most dramatic supernatural elements still felt grounded in believable physical reality. Cornette also points to Calaway's role as a locker room leader, someone who helped guide the culture and professionalism of the entire roster around him for years. Being a respected veteran inside the locker room is a different skill than being a respected performer in the ring, and it is rare for one wrestler to earn both distinctions as completely as Calaway did throughout his career. Beyond simply protecting his character, Calaway also demonstrated a rare ability to adapt his physical style as the industry changed around him. He remained a top-tier main event attraction through multiple distinct eras of professional wrestling, each with different audience expectations and different in-ring trends. Few performers in history have shown that kind of longevity while staying at the very top of the card the entire time. That is why The Undertaker sits at number 1 on Jim Cornette's list of favorite wrestlers. Not simply because of his character's popularity, but because Mark Calaway represents the single greatest example of protecting the business through total commitment, believable execution, and remarkable adaptability across an extraordinarily long and demanding career. So there you have it, all 10 names, from Bobby Eaton at number 10 all the way up to The Undertaker at number 1. None of these choices were random. Each wrestler represents a distinct piece of the same underlying philosophy. Eaton and Anderson show flawless execution and tactical intelligence. Flair and Funk show psychological mastery and emotional versatility across entire careers. Lawler shows the power of pure audience connection. Hart shows disciplined, injury-free precision. Bockwinkel shows sophisticated heel psychology built on words rather than violence. Race shows raw, believable toughness. Austin shows that mainstream success and wrestling fundamentals can coexist, and The Undertaker shows total commitment to protecting the business, even inside the most unusual character imaginable. Taken together, these 10 names build the complete framework Jim Cornette uses to evaluate professional wrestling. Believability, ring psychology, technical execution, and protecting the business are not separate ideas floating around in isolation. They are threads woven through every single wrestler on this list. And once you see that pattern, Cornette's criticism of modern wrestling starts to make a lot more sense. He is not simply an old voice complaining about change. He is measuring everything against these 10 examples of the business done right. That is really the whole point of this countdown. It was never just a list of 10 names to memorize. It was a window into how one of wrestling's most respected minds actually watches the business. Once you understand believability, ring psychology, execution, and protecting the industry, you start watching wrestling differently yourself. You start noticing when a match tells a real story and when it simply throws moves together for a highlight reel. You start noticing when a character stays true to itself and when it breaks apart under its own weight. That is the gift hidden inside Jim Cornette's favorite wrestlers. 10 names, 4 principles, and 1 complete philosophy that still explains everything he loves and everything he criticizes about the sport he has spent his entire life inside.